Hi there, Karen Fabian here, founder of Bare Bones Yoga, and we're up to video 6 in the Learn Anatomy Challenge. So as I reference the PDF guide here, it's video 6 is demonstrating anatomy knowledge in the context of teaching. So if you recall from video number 5, that referred to applying anatomy knowledge to poses. And I gave you that example of Warrior 1 and the action of the quadriceps to straighten the back leg. So here we're talking about demonstrating anatomy knowledge in the context of teaching. And there's many ways we can do that. So I'll give you an example. Let's say that I'm going to be teaching people half pigeon. And I want you to just kind of listen to how I cue this because it's very specific. Lift the right leg high, bend the upper knee, and I want you to move your leg around and notice how the movement is coming from your hip. Now as you come into half pigeon, bring your right knee down on the ground by your right hand and continue to move from your right hip to open that hip up and to create that external rotation. Do it from the hip rather than moving your shin forward and trying to create that movement from the knee. Extend back through your back leg and then lower down onto your forearms. You can also rest your head on a block. Take 5 breaths. So what I want to kind of call out to you is that in the expression of that posture, I was cueing the students to notice that the movement of external rotation, the opening of the hip, was coming from the hip, not the knee. Because my understanding of anatomy is understanding that there's a huge difference between the hip joint and the knee joint in terms of the range of motion available. And knowing that many times students come into half pigeon trying to create the opening from the knee, not the hip, I anticipated that approach and held them back from moving in that way by sharing with them that it was easier to open the hip from the hip versus moving the shin forward in that posture, which is a common thing that you see because many students come to the mat and they have this impression that they've got to get the shin in line with the front of the mat. And that's just kind of old verbiage that's been out there for many years. And so students have this, a lot of times students have this perspective that to do it right, the shin needs to be in line with the frontage of the mat. So that's one example of applying anatomy to teaching. And that in order to do that, I needed to understand the difference between the hip joint and the knee joint. I needed to understand the relationship of the body to the floor, meaning that, let's say I do standing half pigeon, the risk to the knee is much less because here my knee is not pressing down on the ground. As soon as the knee is pressing onto the ground, the risk to the knee inherently goes up because now I'm pressing it. There's pressure, compression there. So there's a lot of different things happening in that. That's just one example. And as you remember from one of the earlier videos, it's a step-by-step process to learn anatomy. So understand that the kind of thing we're talking about now is only available to you as a teacher once you've done the work to go through all the prior steps. At that point, you're able to apply anatomy not only through your cues, but through the sequencing, through the way you reference different things in the context of teaching, the way you answer questions. So it's all predicated on all the steps being done before. So that's the end of this video. We're coming towards the home stretch, so stay tuned. We'll wrap this one up and we'll move into the next one.